Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Today, we have a very special guest speaker. Her name is Jessica, a QA engineer who will be talking about accessibility testing guidelines and strategies. So without further ado, Jessica, please take it away. And I invite all of you to leave your questions and comments in our chat. We will answer them towards the end of the session. Thank you.
Hey, hello everyone. Nice meeting you all. So today I'm going to be presenting to you a subject that's been increasing over the past few years and months, which is accessibility testing guidelines and strategies. Okay. Of course, this presentation, I'm going to be talking about my QA perspective, but I'm also going to be giving some insights for developers, designers. And so I like to start with this table of contents. We're going to be splitting this presentation between 5 parts, okay? So first of all, I'm going to be starting to talk about the importance of accessibility in digital products. Then I'm going to be talking with you guys a little bit more about what types of accessibility testing there are and how do we evaluate if a website or a mobile application, it is conformance with accessibility. So we're going to be talking about guidelines and standards. And then towards the end, I'm going to be demonstrating some common types of accessibility types of testing and also giving like brief tips. Of course, it's not going to be very deep on integrating the accessibility into actual projects. Okay, so no further ado. So why is it such important to have accessible products? Well, we need to make sure that every digital product and service is usable by individuals with disabilities. Okay, and when I'm talking about disability, I am talking about people that can have some type of visual impairment, auditory impairment, motor impairment, or even cognitive impairment. Okay, so we want to, as QAs, developers, designers, we play a crucial role in promoting inclusivity and ensuring equal access to information to everyone. Okay, so as I talked in the beginning, accessibility just grows, and we want to make sure that everyone have the best experience that they can have when using a website or when using a mobile application. Okay, it's also important to note here that accessibility is not just a matter of a good practice and should be a subject that everyone should be learning more about it, but also can be a legal requirement in some countries. So, for example, Canada already have some penalties to mobile or even websites that it's not conformant with the minimum level accessibility. They have some like penalty and even some types of penalties that you can suffer or even not be able to release your application if you're not conformant with accessibility. Okay, so going for this next slide here, I brought this like important and trying to make this impact sentence here that, of course, I talked prior to the prior slide that we have like legal and moral obligations. But I think the most important thing here as software builders that we are is that we have a moral obligation to ensure that digital content is indeed accessible to everyone, regardless of disabilities. Because we're living in a world that, everyone relies on digital products, some form of digital product, okay? So it is like a moral obligation that everyone should be and can be an advocate for accessibility, okay? So what is accessibility testing? It doesn't go any different from any other type of testing, okay? In any other type of development world, you receive a user story that has requirements, and those requirements are testable, are buildable. You have to, check if the requirements are matching the criteria, and if it's not, then you may have a problem and you need to adjust. And accessibility testing, it's no different than that. We have a book with guidelines that applications should meet in order to be considered accessible. Okay, and this process so the process of testing it wants to ensure that digital products like I told before, website, mobile application, documents, and any other type of digital content are usable by individuals with disabilities. Okay, and here, guys, it's important when I'm talking about all types of applications, it's really everything. And even like email marketings, like PDF documents, desktop website applications, Android applications, iOS applications. So any type of product, okay? It is important that. And at the bottom of this slide, guys, I brought like a little reference here because as I go further with the presentation, you'll notice that sometimes I'm going to be speaking about A11Y. And I wanted to reference that A11Y, it's nothing but an acronym for the accessibility word, okay? So the number 11 represents the 11 letters that we have between the A and the Y, because the word accessibility can be like a big word sometimes. So many documentations that you read online, you will see the reference as A11Y. So just keep in mind that when we see that, it's nothing but referring to accessibility, okay? So no further ado, how do we evaluate if our applications is meeting like minimum or even greatest level of accessibility? Okay, so today we have the WCAG guidelines, okay? And this is nothing but a book, okay? And WCAG, it was made by the World Wide Web Consortium, which is mostly known as W3C. And this is really the go-to standard for digital accessibility conformance, okay? So these are actual testable criteria. Like I said, like when you're developing a product, you get like user stories with acceptance criteria that you need to meet and you need to follow. And if your code is not meeting those criteria, then we have a bug, or we have to readjust the story or whatever. So the WCAG, it's like a book with a lot of levels of conformance, and you need to be meeting these types of conformance to actually see if your website or mobile application is accessible. And guys, the WCAG, it's separated by 3 levels. Okay, you'll hear me talking about a lot about A, AA, and AAA levels of accessibility. Okay, these are the 3 existing levels that we have today. And you can see that the A level is like the minimum level. Like your company doesn't want to go for that because it's like the minimum level. It means that your website or application is barely accessible at this point. Okay, so many companies are striving to meet at least AA level, okay? And you see as the levels, they go higher, it is also like tougher to meet the requirements because they get trickier to be met, and the AAA level includes all the requirements from AA and A levels. So it's like the hardest level, but also the greatest level accessibility that a site or a mobile application could have. So WCAG is basically based on 4 principles, okay? We call it the POUR principles, okay? Which meaning that when we're building something, or when we're testing something, or when we're designing something, we must keep in mind that we're designing a product that should at least meet these 4 base principles, okay? Which is the product that I'm building or coding or testing, it has to be perceivable for users. It has to be operable for all users. It has to be understandable for all the users. And it has to be robust. Okay? So when we're talking about perceivable, it means that people may have like sensory limitations, and the information presented on the website should be the same for everyone, and everyone should be able to perceive that information equally. Okay? Operable, we're talking about that users that may have like some type of motor or cognitive impairment. And let's say, for example, that a user relies only on the keyboard to navigate. For some reason, they cannot use a mouse, okay? So it means that your website has to have like the minimum criteria for accessibility, for the user can just navigate through your website with the tab key or something like that, okay? And then at the end, we have understandable and robust, okay? So every information has to be clear and simple on your website. So making it easier for everyone to comprehend and navigate easily. And last but not least, it has to be robust, because people with disabilities sometimes may rely on other agents to navigate on a website. And a good example of that would be screen readers, okay? So let's say that a user, relies on using a screen reader to navigate on your website. It has to be robust enough that the user can navigate without losing the information, and being able to navigate and operate, in an easy and in a good way. And again, maintain the best experience that we can provide them. Okay. Okay, I talked a lot about WCAG, and some of you may be still wondering, okay, but you talked about WCAG, but I still don't get it. I still don't understand what is it. It's like I said, it's really like a book. And you'll see that, and later on I'll share the website that you can access for yourselves to check. And I even recommend that you check for yourselves. But it's really basically a book, and it's going to have all the types of criteria that a website has to meet in order to be considered accessible. And in the website of WCAG, you can filter. Let's say that you want your website to meet conformance A and AA. You can filter that and read all the criteria. And you can even click on each criteria. The website will give you a context. The website will give you a real example of how you can implement that. The website also gives us like a bad example of how you should not implement that. So it's really, really a good reference to use, And I'll briefly, we'll leave this slide here for just a couple of seconds. If you guys want to look for yourselves, WCAG guide, it's like in the web, it's like there for everyone to see, to check, and also, to understand a little bit more about accessibility. Okay, let's move on. Now, as a QA, I already had some experience testing accessibility for digital products, mostly for websites and mobile applications. And here I brought a couple of examples that we usually test as QAs, but you don't have to be a QA to test, right? You can also check some of these testing as a developer or even as a designer. Okay. So for the level A conformance level accessibility, it's there in the WCAG website that, if you want your website to be at least conformant with level A, at least any element of your website should have an alt text, okay? And it should have enough color contrast. This is part of level A. Then we go to level AA. Okay, so if your website wants to meet at least the requirements AA, it also has to have all the attributes that I just spoke about level A, the text alternative and the color contrast. And it also has to have like the heading orders in good shape. It has to have a keyboard navigation order. It has to be, robust to operate with screen readers and have like captions for media and so on. Okay, and you see that the AAA, it's a little more tricky. Your website, let's say if it has like a video or something, the video has to have like sign language interpretation or audio description. So you see that as the levels increase, it is more hard also to meet the criteria, but it's also, again, the go-to standard to go, and all companies should at least strive to meet at least AA and AAA. Okay, I'm gonna be like getting a little bit more in detail in any few of these that I added here. Again, this slide does not have all the levels, all the requirements that a website has to have to be conformant with level A, AA, AAA. It has a couple. I just added a couple. So, if you want to see all the ones that are part of level A, I would recommend you to go to WCAG quick reference guideline. Okay, so starting to talk a little bit alt text attributes. So imagine that a person that relies on screen readers, it's navigating through your website, okay? And you have not set this attribute correctly. So in example of an image, okay, so the screen reader is passing, if you don't know what a screen reader do, it's like you can use gestures just to swipe through the screen, and at each element that the screen reader faces, it reads out loud for the person to understand where the person is on the screen and what is the type of element and whatever it is that the person is navigating on. So many of the screen readers, they rely on the application having good, clear alt text attributes. So imagine that it has an image on a website, and so the user is navigating, it's reading a good text about any subject. And so and when the user hits an image and the image doesn't have a description, imagine that the user, the screen reader back will just say for the person, okay, this is an image. And the person will not know what the image is because it wasn't described on this attribute. The same goes for a button or any other type of element. Imagine the person going through another type of flow that, you know, is trying to buy something or add something to, you know, to their cart. And imagine that when it's in the last part of the flow, you know, the person's trying to buy something, or just, you know, going through a page. And so the screen reader goes to a button, and instead of saying for the user, okay, this is a button that you can use to add to your cart, because that's what the screen reader will do. It will, you know, read back what the attribute says. So imagine that this attribute is also empty. The screen reader would just read back, this is a button. But, you know, what does this button does, you know? So it is very important that we have these attribute sets correctly. And as QAs, we can test that either by actually using screen readers, or we can also, in the case of web applications, we can inspect the web page and search for elements and see if these attributes are set correctly. Now going for color contrast. This is another important type of testing, okay? And I'll tell you what. Imagine people that have some visual impairment. It can be even like colorblind level, and they cannot distinguish like the colors, okay? So this requirement from WCAG says that every background and foreground should have sufficient color contrasts. Okay, and for us to check that, we have a very interesting plugin. It's a Chrome plugin, it's a free plugin, and it is called Color Contrast Checker. With this plugin, you can pick the color of the background and the color from the foreground. And I use JobCity's website to use as an example here. And the plugin will calculate if the color contrast is sufficient and it's meeting the WCAG requirements. It does that automatically for you, you know. And you can see in this case here that the JobCity's website, the blue background with the black font color that we have, it is a great example of a good color contrast, because not only passes the AA requirements, but it also passed the AAA requirements. Okay, so this is a tool that we can use. Again, this can be used by a developer, it can be used by a QA, it can be used by a designer. So, you know, anyone could have this plugin and, you know, use it to make the colors met the requirements for WCAG. Another good example in another type of testing that we perform as QAs is the tab order. Okay, so like I said before, people with motor impairments may sometimes rely just navigating through a website using the keyboard, for example. And let's say they navigate using just the tab, the key tab. So this requirement on the WCAG says that every website has to have a keyboard focus order. And that means that the order should always be from left to right, from top to bottom. Again, I use the website from JobCity, and it's also meeting the requirements for the WCAG requirement. And it's a great example because as you can see that the elements that user is navigating using the tab, it should have like a chronological order. It wouldn't make sense that if they hit tab, they go from JobCity to the title, like three elements below. Because the order has to be chronological, it has to make sense, right? Because he's reading through all the elements in the screen. Okay, so again, we have a plugin to test that. It's called Tab A11Y plugin. Again, it's a free plugin. It's a Chrome plugin. Everyone can have it, and it's pretty easy to use. It's just like a click. You click, and it reads, and it runs a script on the background of your website, and it tells you back the order. And all you have to do is visually see if the order makes sense. So I also talked a lot about assistive technologies, and we have these three very important ones today. I think it's the most common ones, which are the VoiceOver from Apple, it's TalkBack from Android, and NVDA for desktop. Okay, so these three examples here, they are screen readers. Okay, and like I said before, these screen readers, they provide like spoken out loud feedback for users. Okay, so they just describe out loud what appears on their screen. And that, again, is important why we have to set the alt text correctly. Because if it's not set correctly, the screen readers will not work correctly for users. Okay. Now I'm going to be going to integrating accessibility to the project. Okay. This can be a little tricky because I know that sometimes projects don't have like the right timing or the right budget or even the right knowledge to implement accessibility. And that makes sense, But a tip that I would give you guys is to try to engage the development team and the project managers and product owners in discussions very early in the project, and try to already make room for these requirements, because if we do that in the early life cycle of the project, it is way easier to implement than having already an existing application and having to go back and rethink and redesign all the application again and having eyes to accessibility. Okay, so like I said, have the involvement of the design team very early in the project and start these discussions with the designer team, because they usually are the first people that will create how the website or how the application will look like. So if they already have in mind that, the rules of the basics of WCAG, they will already know that a button has to have this sufficient color, that the elements can, be in a certain order, and it has to be, the information has to be presented clearly and easily. So, there's ways that we can create prototypes already focusing on accessibility. So this is very important. And then, of course, in the QA, make the QA team also capture the requirements in test cases. Because like I said, the accessibility testing is no different than any other type of testing. So you can test that, you can measure, and you can have actual test cases with the requirement and have that documented for the project. Okay. So before I complete the presentation, guys, I like to leave this number here on your screen. It was taken from the World Health Organization. And it says that currently we have 1.3 billion people that have some form of disability. Okay. And this portion relies on digital technologies like websites, mobile applications, services, and social interactions. Okay, so with that being said, again, I like to bring everyone to try to research more about accessibility, try to include that in your project if possible, because we can always make a difference in people's lives, So I also invite you, to be an advocate for A11Y, and I'm also, available if you guys have any questions or anything related to accessibility, right? So thank you.
Okay, well, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing what you know. We have a couple of questions in our chat. So let's begin with the first one. The first one comes from Matias Marin. His question is, what are the most important tools to use as designers or developers for accessibility checks?
That's a good question. Thank you. So I presented a couple during this presentation, such as like the color contrast checker. This is a good one. We also have the tab order checker, which is also a plugin. But other than those tools that I mentioned, it's also important to mention that WCAG has a dedicated page with more than 200 tools and plugins, free and premium plugins, that we can read through and use it to run scripts on the websites and mobile applications to understand and evaluate how to check the accessibility. It's also important to note here that I talked a lot about the free plugins and a very manual way of checking that, which is like going through each plugin and checking and testing it. But it is important to note here that we also have like premium tools today, automated tools that can run scripts fully read the website or fully read a mobile application and give you back a full report of what are your points that you're missing on accessibility and which points that you can improve as well. So again, go to WCAG and we can for sure search a lot of tools that are interesting tools.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. We have another question in our chat. It comes from Daniela. Her question is, Jess, how do we evaluate the level of accessibility in websites?
Again, another great question. Again, the initial point here would be to understand what level of conformance do you want to reach in your website or your mobile application. So let's say you want to at least, I at least hope that after this presentation, everyone should be like striving to meet at least AA level. So let's say you want to meet AA level. The first thing that I would recommend is to go to WCAG. Again, everything is there, like everything that you can think about accessibility, any question, any tool, any reference guide, it's there. It's there for sure. So I would recommend you to go there. You filter by the AA level that you want to meet. And using that, I would recommend you, if you are a PO or a PM of your project, create criteria and make your QA or dev team do a QA audit, to make sure that, you're meeting. And in that way, if you have like all the AA criteria written on like a user story or something, and then you do a QA audit to see if your website is meeting that way you can evaluate which level your website it's in, reaching. And again, I also talked about like premium tools. We have paid tools that can do that automatically for you. It just runs a script and it will tell you back, okay, your website is conformance with level A, and this is why, because your elements are missing this, and that. So we also have these automatic reports as well.
Okay. And we have one final question that comes from Ignacio. So his question is, how do web content accessibility guidelines and the American Disability Act relate to one another? And do they complement each other, or is one served by the other?
Yeah, that's a great question, Asio. They do complement each other. But again, I want you to understand that the official guide that we are using as of today is the WCAG. Okay, so if you're talking about like jurisdictions or even legal penalties for like some countries like Canada, like I spoke before, Canada has actual like penalty if your website is not meeting like some level of accessibility. So in those cases, like the go-to standard that we have to look for is definitely the WCAG. But again, it's they both like accommodate each other. So good question.
Okay, let me just check. Yep, we don't have any other questions in our chat. We have received comments saying, let's go, Jess. Thank you, Jessica. and NVDA is the best. So once again, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing what you know. And we will see each other next month. Bye-bye, everybody.